Assalamu alaikum, my dear participants. This is the second session of our Islam Study Circle. I welcome you to this session. If you remember the last time, I had posited the fact that the way we will proceed in these sessions would be that we'll divide them into two parts. In the first part, we'll discuss some important point related to character building and our own personality development. And the second part would be related to some misconception, some popular misconception which has arisen in these recent times. And the reason I had also explained in my last session was that it is essential that we regard Islam just not a mere intellectual exercise, but something of an ideology which, if we are convinced of, we need to adapt ourselves in accordance with it. So Islam is not just intellectual exercise in which you come to know of certain points or certain intellectual arguments about something. It is in fact a guidance in which we have to change ourselves for the better. So that is why I had divided this session into two parts. In the first part, we shall discuss things which relate to our own personality building and character development. So if you remember the last time, I had raised this issue that character building and personality development has to be a very concerted effort. It cannot be something of a dismissive effort in which we listen to a couple of lectures or we read some books and expect ourselves to be better people. We need to work harder than that, because just realize that whenever we are doing something in our own worldly lives, we work very, very meticulously to achieve a particular target. Thus, for example, when we are working for our exams or when we are working for a target in an organization, the way we work is that we make a plan, a concerted plan, we set out targets, we mark dates, and then we try to follow the schedule that we have adjusted or adopted for ourselves. And then, of course, we evaluate our productivity as well. So if we have to build our character, if we have to build our personalities, the task and the methodology is no different. So we need to be much more meticulous in this. And if you recall, I had cited before you the example of Benjamin Franklin, who in his early 20s had set about himself the target to become a very, very sound person as far as character is concerned. He is also one of the founding fathers of the United States, as you all know, one of the founding fathers, and the third or the fourth US president as well. And in spite of being a politician, he was in fact more of a polymath. He was a scientist, he was an inventor, he was a philosopher, he was a politician, and he was also a very, very adept social scientist. And he devised those 13 virtues, which I just discussed last time, that he made a chart in which those 13 virtues would be set out on the left column, and then on each of the days of the week he would mark if he had done anything against those virtues, and so on and so forth. This would indicate to him that how efficient he has been in developing his character. So what I'm saying is that if you want to build your character, the first point is that it has to be more than a lecture effort. It has to be something in which more time has to be given. And one of the methodologies I would recommend is the same which Benjamin Franklin adopted, in which each of us writes down those virtues. That they could differ because some of us might be akin to more of these virtues, and some others more used to some others. So we can pick up those 10 or 12 virtues, any virtues. Of course, these virtues are common to all humanity, and then see how we fare vis-a-vis these virtues every day. So the virtue or the universal value that I'm going to discuss today relates to gratitude. Gratitude is as simple a thing as it can be. The first starting point in our lives to have a meaningful relationship with our Creator is to have an attitude in which we are always thankful for the blessings we have. As the famous adage goes, that we have to keep counting our blessings, and if we do, they will easily outnumber the deprivations that we may have. We have so many things to boast about. We have so many things to be happy about. We have so many things to count and to thank God about. Just start with your own simple body. You'll find out that the biggest boon of God, the biggest blessing of God is that all of us possess normal human bodies. And to be a person who is not handicapped in any way is a big, big benefit. And I can tell you that if you look at people who are deprived vis-a-vis their bodies in some form or the other, you'll find out how blessed you are. Thus, for example, just take the example of our own eyes. The way we see, we take it for granted that we can always see. But look at the people who are blind. More so people who were able to see in their lives, but later on they became blind. They knew what seeing is, they knew what sight is, and then they lost their eyesight. You can just imagine that by shutting off your eyes for a couple of minutes and then trying to do what we're supposed to do every day. You can try to do the drill, the task that we always do, maybe change our clothes, eat food, go out. And if you don't have any eyes, you can just imagine how difficult it would be. More so, it will become a gloomy exercise for all of us, having darkness all around us. And look at the people who, in spite of having no eyes or little eye vision, they still rejoice. They still thank God for what they have. So the biggest lesson that we can learn is that whenever we feel low, whenever we feel that we have been deprived, the best way to overcome our depression, the best way to conquer these low feelings is that we always should involve ourselves in counting our blessings. I always encourage my students, my colleagues, and even, of course, my own self, that whenever we have the time, we are going in a car or maybe sitting idle, the best utility of idle time is to keep counting the blessings that we have, starting with, of course, our own body. To have a normal eyesight, to have normal limbs. I can tell you that I knew a person for whom sleep had become an alien thing. He was an insomniac. He suffered from severe bouts of insomnia. This sleep that we take for granted, and as soon as we lie down, we are able to go off to sleep. But not so for the people who are insomniacs. So the person I knew, he told me many a time that he would stay awake all night. And in the morning, when he would be wanting to go to sleep somehow or the other, but sleep would not come to him. He would not be able to concentrate. He would not be able to drive. He would not be able to lead a normal life. And he went to all parts of the world to have his problem solved, to have this ailment solved. But right up till death, he died a couple of years ago, he was suffering from this severe insomnia. And you can see a thing as sweet as sleep, as sweet as slumber that we undertake every day, how it can become a novelty for people. I saw my aunt dying of lung cancer, and I could see that she had to take each breath in a voluntary manner. Imagine that we breathe ourselves without even thinking that we are breathing. But for a person who has lung cancer, he or she has to sort of inhale in a voluntary manner. He has to, or she has to deliberately inhale. It's not an involuntary sort of a thing. It's a voluntary thing. You have to decide that you're going to inhale each breath. And this becomes a big agony for all of us. So, my dear participants, we need to understand that the blessings that we have from the Almighty, they abound. Also, I'd like to cite a very dear friend of mine. He has a daughter who's now 18 or 19 years old, but lo and behold, she was born blind, deaf, dumb, paralyzed. 4 things. And she just grew on her bed. Now she's 18, it's like being a vegetable. And she does utter some sounds, but by and large, they are, of course, not at all understandable. She has grown and grown and grown. And his parents, one of my friends, of course, he's a father. He and his wife looks after their daughter. But we just cannot imagine the agony they might be going through while they raise their daughter. So my dear participants, the things to rejoice, the things to be happy of are so many that we just cannot ignore them. We need to make a conscious effort to always count our blessings, to always see what we have in our surroundings. We have parents, we have extended family, we have people who care for us, we have nature around us who is caring for us. The nature on which the Almighty has made our Mother Nature, see that it always is working for ourselves. The sun does not shine for its own self. The moon does not shimmer for its own self. Streams and trees and air and mountains, they don't live for their own selves. Whatever they do is for the benefit of others, for the benefit of man, for the benefit of humankind. And this shows that the Almighty primarily wants us to be selfless as well, to keep counting the blessings and keep giving benefit to others. And this is the biggest manifestation of gratitude that we need to repay, or we pay back whatever we have, whatever qualities we have, whatever benefits we have achieved, whatever things that we have acquired. If we are able to pay back in some form or the other, this is the best way to express gratitude to the Almighty. We need to understand that the food that we take, that the food that we eat every day and think that it's for granted, not so for so many millions of people who live below the poverty line. They don't have enough food, they don't have shelter, they don't have clothes, they don't have access to clean water, they don't have access to education, to any good physician. So we need to understand that there are so many things, there are so many people who are around us, and they live in this state of poverty and deprivation. And in spite of that, you may see that these people, they still seem very happy. They still seem very adapted and comfortable in the lives that they are leading. And to us, this might be something of a big anguish and agony that they might be going through. And perhaps the reason and perhaps the philosophy behind this from the Almighty is that we must always look at others who are lesser off than us, and then decide for our own selves that how blessed we are. And this gratitude, this expression of thankfulness to the Almighty is an automatic expression of what the Almighty has given us. Let me narrate to you a very short story on an episode which I always remember, because my hairs stood at end when I went through that particular time of my life, or maybe that one day, and I just thought that how on earth are people living here? So this happened about a couple of decades ago when I was invited to a wedding in a slum area. And when we were invited there, so we went into that area, and then it was cordoned off. As soon as food was served, we were told to go to another chamber where the food would be, and then as soon as we entered that place, it was just closed shut. And I did notice that, but again, I just ignored it. I thought it would be some administrative measure that they have done so. So it took us about 15 minutes or 20 minutes to have food. And as soon as we had finished having food, that closed chamber was opened. And lo and behold, I saw about 25 or 30 small children aged 6 to 10 years having small empty bags, running into that chamber and then starting to collect the bones which we had actually left in our plates. They would just collect the bone and try to rip off whatever meat it was left off, and then they would either gather it in their bags or they would start eating it. And this was a sight that really made me cry from my inside. I can never forget that sight. And I thought that how taken for granted do we take eating food every day? And look at these children. They're deprived of these children, all of them very slim, all of them looking very deprived. And they were so happy to have that small scrap of meat that they could just take off from a bone and then eat it. So my stress here, my emphasis here, my dear participants, my dear viewers, is that if we have ears which can really hear, if we have eyes which can really see, and we just don't have eyesight, but we have insight as well, we can clearly see how blessed we are. We can clearly see how the Almighty has given us so many things in so many ways that we just cannot even imagine. So I always say that the best way to counter our low feelings and depression is always look upon this as a therapy. So gratitude itself is a therapy. Expressing gratitude is a therapy. And I call this, in fact, I have given a name to it. It's called gratitude therapy. So whenever we feel that there is something amiss, whenever we feel that there's something wrong or something which we are missing in our lives or we are feeling low, this is the therapy that we need to adopt. And if I may add to it, the second part of this therapy is that we must share our blessings with others as well, because this is the best way to express gratitude. Gratitude or thanking God is not to be by the tongue merely, by merely saying Alhamdulillah, or saying words which actually express our thankfulness to the Almighty. We have to thank the Almighty through our practical examples as well. We must undertake practical steps to thank the Almighty. And the best way to thank the Almighty is that we must share our blessings. We must allocate our time to serve our society, to serve people around us. We must take out time in which we are able to do some community service. We are able to serve the society in any way that we can. And also, my dear viewers, the best thing in this regard that we can further do is that we need to educate our children on this as well, that they must always look at the positive side. So you see, when you count your blessings, you always become an optimist. In spite of being deprived of certain things, if you keep on looking at that silver lining, you always think that the blessings that you have are much more than what you don't have. So this makes us an optimist, and we need to transfer this optimism, this positive attitude to our younger generation by telling them that we have been blessed by the Almighty. So therefore, the best way to thank the Almighty is that we need to share our blessings. We need to share whatever we have with those who are deprived. Let's make it a point that whatever we can, and you see, this sharing is not just by the wealth that we have. It can be through our time. It can be through our skills. It can be by merely listening out a person in distress, just listening to his bothers, his trials, his tribulations, just giving him a smile, smiling back at him, just lending him a hand, just letting him rest on your shoulder, just telling him that you are there for that person. So you see, to benefit others, to think of others is the best way to show gratitude to the Almighty. And whenever we do something which is against this, we are actually being ungrateful to God. And this always happens, my dear viewers, when at times we are not granted our wish. There are times in which we plan for something, but the plan does not materialize. We find that things that we wanted, we never got. We prayed to the Almighty, we supplicated before Him, but unfortunately, we never got what we wanted. And this is the particular time in which we get ungrateful to the Almighty and we start complaining and brooding. So that is one area, that is one time in which we need to get hold of ourselves and tell ourselves that if we are not able to achieve what we wanted to achieve, there must be some wisdom behind it. Because you see, the Almighty, whenever He deprives us of something, whenever He does not give us something that we want, there is always some good hidden for us, but we are at times not able to decipher that. We need to trust the Almighty. We need to understand that if He has not granted our wish or our supplication or our dua for some reason, then there is some philosophy behind it which the Almighty intends for us. And this is where we have to believe in Him. So, in a nutshell, this gratitude therapy, this act of gratitude in itself, first of all, it needs to be understood that this expression of gratitude is something which should come out automatically from us. It's like a spontaneous reaction to the favors that we get. Remember, whenever we get a prize or whenever we get a gift from someone, our automatic or instantaneous reaction to that is we say thank you, because we have obtained some gift, some present from some near one. And our instant reaction to that is, our instant response is that we say thank you. So look at the things that we have been given by the Almighty. And if we start realizing them, our instant response at that time also should be thanking God. For in the one case, we had received just one gift from a person and we thanked him. And here is a case in which we are receiving so much from so many sides, from so many angles, from so many spheres, in so many directions, that this feeling of being drenched with gratitude, I think, should never leave us. Because if we start thinking, we just end up saying, well, God, you have really blessed us with so much. We are overwhelmed with what you have given us. We are really thankful to you. So as I said, this, first of all, it needs to be understood that this expression of gratitude is a natural response to any gift that all of us might obtain from anyone. So if we are obtaining something from God, all the more reason to be thankful. And the second point I made is that this thankfulness, this gratitude, is not something to be merely expressed by the tongue. It has to be, it must manifest itself in some practical activity in which we share the blessings that we have in some form or the other. And this is not, as I said, just merely by distributing or donating our funds or our wealth that we have. That's one way in which we can share our blessings. There are several other ways, as I said. We can share our skills. For example, if we have a particular profession that we are doing, we can perhaps coach people in that profession, or we can allocate 5% of our time or 10% of our time in which we shall use that skill for the benefit of humankind. And let me also point out, my dear viewers, in this regard, that being magnanimous, being people who care for us something, should come from us as spontaneously as water gushes out of a fountain. When water gushes out of the fountain, it does not see who is drinking it, whether it's a Muslim or a non-Muslim or even an animal. The water that gushes out of a fountain is going to benefit every life that it comes into contact with. So, in a very similar manner, our own expression of gratitude should not make distinction with any living being. We have to give benefit to humankind, even to animal kind, even to the kingdom of plants, however we can. So this is how we should proceed, and this is how we should actually, I would say, make a motto of our lives, that we have to undertake this expression of gratitude not only as a therapy, but also as a right which the Almighty imposes on us. And also, when we are walking or maybe roaming around in a car or sitting idle, the best way to make use of that time is to look out. For example, if we are going off on a road, look at the people around us, look at the people who are waiting at stations, who don't have the means that we have. Look at the people who are exposed to the sun outside, or maybe to the cold winter outside, or people who are riding less privileged conveyances than we are riding. So there are so many things that we can do. So I'll end my first session here and leave you if you have questions regarding this. But let me just reiterate that if we want to become grateful individuals, and if we have this sense of gratefulness in us that we need to express, then we have to make a very concerted effort to keep counting our blessings. And as I said, character building and personality development is something in which merely listening to a lecture would not be sufficient. We need to make a chart or a plan in which we have to express whatever we have done every day, and we have to remind ourselves whatever we did wrong, whatever we did contrary to that particular value that we were trying to inculcate in our own selves. And in this case, in today's case, it is gratitude. So gratitude, gratitude, and gratitude. Nothing else but gratitude should be our motto in life. We have to be thankful individuals. We have to be positive individuals. We have to always think what we have, and always think what we have given to our country, not the other way around. Let us not think what our country has given to us. Let us always think what we have given to our country, to our society, and to the people around us. So we end our session here. And before we move on to the next part, if there are any questions or points of discussion, this is the time.
For questions, please either click on the box under the hand icon that you have in front of your name, or you can also type up your question and I'll read it out to Dr. Shehzad on your behalf. Doctor, while we wait for the questions, the sound has been in and out, up and down.
Okay.
I'm not sure why exactly it's happening, but if you could turn the computer and be in the middle, because Yeah. And if you could say something so I can confirm you have
Okay,
a steady voice.
is this better?
Yes. This is perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
I try to speak a little more try to speak louder.
Thank you. It's actually in and out, and that's what was more distracting, but thank you very much. I don't have any questions, Dr. Shahab, so
Okay.
you might proceed to the next.
Okay. So let's now proceed to the second part of our session. And as I said that the first part would relate to personality development and character building. The second part would relate more to some of the common misconceptions that we have generally come to take as actually part and parcel of Islam, whereas on the other hand, we'll find out from more study that there are certain things which have become popular. They become popular notions, they have become popular truths, they become myths, but they have little to do with the actual truth. So I'm going to bring up some of the points that particularly relate to the Prophet's personality vis-a-vis when he gives or when he talks to when he talked to his companions, to his Sahaba, and how he actually led his life in a way in which there were people after him, even in his own life, who thought that his personality cannot be split up into various aspects, and therefore whatever he did, they thought that they had to follow him. For example, if he brushed his teeth, of course brushing the teeth was not there at that time. There was a miswak that he would use. It's like a twig that he would brush his teeth with, and then he would wear white clothes, for example, or he would eat certain things which he liked. He would ride a camel, he would take a stick when he would deliver the Friday sermon, and so many other things which took place in his own times. So we don't at times make this demarcation while we are studying religion and hadith in particular. There are a lot of directives given in our hadith or discussed in our ahadith which are actually have no relationship with our religion. Because the Prophet was not always speaking of religion. He was also a human being. He had several things to take care of. He was talking with his wives. He was at times discussing some issues with his attendant, Anas bin Malik, his attendant. At times he would be teaching people. At times he would be just making a point, maybe in a light-hearted manner. At times he would be communicating something which was sort of a norm in his society. For example, how to get well in certain circumstances. He would just transfer certain prescriptions of the Arabs that he had heard, and he would just say, okay, why don't you eat this and you'll become well. So there was a part of his personality in which he was behaving as a common human being, in which, of course, he never asked us to obey him. And all his whatever he was telling us was basically in the form of an advice or in the form of a person when he's a human being. And of course, on one instance, he has even bifurcated his personality, and he has told us that إِذَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّن دِينِكُمْ فَخُذُوا بِهِ وَإِذَا أَمَرْتُمْ بِشَيْءٍ بِرَأْيِي فَإِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ, which means that whenever I tell you something which relates to religion, then you have to hold fast to it, do adopt it. But whenever I say something in my human capacity, I am a human being. I can even falter, and I can even at times make a wrong decision. In those particular matters, you don't have to follow me. So this distinction, which he himself actually specified, is not always kept in consideration and distinction by our own selves. And we think that whatever we find in our hadith, whatever we find in his sayings, relates to mandatory following, because we think that whatever he said in our hadith constitutes religion. Whereas I said, he himself is reported to have said that whenever I speak something regarding religion, only then are you obligated to follow me. Other than that, this is not your responsibility. For example, this is not your responsibility to wear white clothes. As we know, there are people who wear turbans or they dress up like the Prophet. Of course, if they do this as love for the Prophet, we would not object to it. But if they say that this is part of religion or this is some sunnah of the Prophet, then this is something we have to perhaps stop him and tell him that the Prophet himself said that we have to follow the Prophet in the sphere of religion. not in this affair of culture or society in which he lived. So therefore today, if he in his own times used swords or horses for battles, we just cannot say that the same should apply today, and we should go back to horse riding or horses when we are waging a war and use swords and spears. So this is a very, very important distinction, my dear viewers, which people at times don't make. And then they start regarding things which the Prophet did to be a sunnah of the Prophet. For example, people would say that using olive oil because he liked olive oil is a sunnah, or brushing the teeth with a miswak is a sunnah. Although they would allow you to brush your teeth with a toothbrush, but they would say that the proper way and which the Prophet did was, and which earns more reward, is using the miswak. So, or for example, if you wear white clothes, or for example, if you clean yourself or your own self with a certain fluid. So all these things which basically are which were cultural, the Prophet never wanted us to follow. And in a very similar vein is the issue of the medicines or these certain prescriptions which have been handed down to us from him through various ahadiths. For example, heartburning or heart disease or influenza or stomach ache. There's so many things that all of us suffer every day or every now and then, and we think that there is a remedy to all these, and this remedy has been given by the Prophet. Let me tell you that if he gave this remedy, it was not in his capacity as the Prophet of God. He gave this remedy because he was also a human being living in a society in which we have all sorts of things, in which we have these prescriptions. Don't we have in our own society today? We find our own adults, our own parents, or our own grandparents telling us that you can eat this and it'll have this benefit for you, and so on and so forth. So we need to realize that a lot of prescriptions which are given for the Prophet for many things, they are not given in his capacity of the Prophet of God. It is given in his capacity of a person who was part of the Arab society. And therefore, if he transferred some of these prescriptions to us, it was because he was also a human being. And we need to understand this, that we always subtract this part of his personality from him and always think that whatever he is uttering, whatever he is saying has to be religion in all cases. This is not the case. This is not always the case, I would say. We have to make this distinction. The Prophet was also a human being. The Prophet was also a messenger of God. So he is absolutely, he must be obeyed whenever he says something as in the capacity of a messenger of God. But when he is saying something, let me give you another example. We know that in one of the battles, I think it was the Battle of Badr, when he decided to go to a particular place, one of his companions, Habab bin Munzir, said that, are you telling us to go to that place out of your own ijtihad or your own personal preference, or is it something which God has told you to go to that point and then fight? The Prophet replied, no, it's my own choice. I think that place is better. And you know what Habab bin Munzir said? He said, if that is the case, if you've not been guided by God and you're saying that you have to go to that vantage point to wage battle, then let me tell you that that is not a good place, because if you go there, such and such problems will arise. And after some discussion, the Prophet acceded. He accepted his viewpoint and changed his opinion. A number of examples I can cite in this regard, in which the Prophet, when he actually said something and some of his companions asked him whether he is saying this out of his own opinion or from God, and whenever he would say that he's saying it out of his own opinion, his companions would discuss and debate with him, and at times, as I said, in this particular case and many other cases, he would also change his opinion. Very similar, my viewers, is another set of directives in this regard, which he gave as a person who was administratively responsible for the subjects, for the people of his country. And an example in that case is that he said that in the strife-ridden atmosphere of Arabia, we find that caravans are looted, they are plundered. And particularly women who are traveling with those caravans, they are not only looted and plundered, but at times they are molested as well. So he said, excuse me, he said that if you have to travel for long distances, if you have to travel for such and such a period of time, then women must not travel alone. They have to travel with a mahram. Now, this particular hadith, these are ahadith which we find in our hadith books. They have become a basis, or I would say erroneous basis of legislation. And we find, for example, if you go for Hajj or for Umrah, we find that...
Dr. Shehzad, I am very sorry to interrupt. I think you have a wireless mic, and because of that, there is some conflict. When you sit back, we can hear you better. When you're closer to the computer, then there's a problem.
Is that okay?
If you can come a little forward.
Is this okay?
I think there's some issue somewhere. When you sit back, sometimes that's the best quality that we are getting.
Okay, let me know if this is okay.
A little back, if you would, please.
Back? Or
Yes.
close?
Well, I think when you were sitting back, then we could hear you better.
Is it like this?
With the mic. Yes, with the mic.
Is this okay?
Thank you. It's much better. Thank you.
I forgot to have a glass of water beside me. Okay, anyway. So I said that the very similar set of directives are ones in which the Prophet has administratively asked his subjects that they should not travel alone, especially women, in distances, long distances, because there is a chance in which they'll get polluted, plundered, and even molested. And he said that whenever women have to travel alone, they must travel with a mahram. Now, on the face of it, this looks to be a religious directive, as many people have construed. And today even, we find Saudi Arabia following this policy in which women who come for Hajj or for Umrah and they are below 40 years of age, they are required to come with a mahram, and if they don't have a mahram, they are not allowed to enter Saudi Arabia for any reason. Now, what happened is that some of the scholars thought that this is a religious directive, and if the Prophet has asked us to follow this directive, then it has to be for all times to come. Whereas we need to understand, when this directive was given, it was given in his capacity of a ruler of a society which was fraught with strife and with looting and with plunder. So in order to safeguard the honor and respect of women, he actually asked all his followers that in such cases, women must not travel alone. But if situations change, if travel and journeys become much more safe and secure the way they have now become, for example, we just hop on an aircraft and reach the destination in a couple of hours, 7 hours or 8 hours, and there is no threat to any honor or respect of women. So therefore, we can easily see that this directive no longer holds. Directives always hold on the basis for which they are given. For example, if they are given on the basis of a protection, or they are preemptive in nature, they give us as a precaution, they are given to us as a precaution, then we need to understand that as soon as the danger finishes, the directive does not necessarily hold. For example, people can do what they want to, but even if they want to still follow it, but it's not a binding thing. So authorities like Saudi Arabia, for example, they need to realize that this is something which is a personal choice in the first place. Whether a person would like to travel alone or not, this is not something of a ruling which relates to state authorities. It is a personal advice given by the Prophet to his people so that they could travel in a safe environment. However, if that safe environment is already made available to them, and of course, they do not need to follow that, and they can make their own secure arrangements. So this is another example in which we need to understand that the Prophet, when he gave this directive, it was in certain circumstances, it was in certain situations in which he wanted our respect and honor of our women to be protected. Today, if this protection is already provided, then this condition of mahram does not need to be followed, because it was never given for situations in which there was no danger. So, in a nutshell, we need to understand that whenever we are understanding various sayings of the Prophet, various ahadith of the Prophet, there is a context to these ahadith. There is a background to all of these ahadith that a person or a scholar of Islam can always furnish if he has a sound knowledge of religion and of the Quran itself and the Sunnah itself. It tells him to place directives at their proper areas. You see, all directives are not placed at the same level. All of them are not obligatory. All of the directives do not always belong to the sphere of Islam. So they have various categories, and we need to understand these categories. Let me also give you another example in this case, since I have brought up this issue of context and background as well, that at times the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there are ahadiths which are reported from him in which we find that the Prophet would actually there would be reports which would be wrongly ascribed to him, and at times he would correct them, and at times his own companions would correct them. To give an example, there is a report which says in our hadith books, it says that women are bad omen. They bring bad luck. In fact, the whole hadith says that as far as bad luck is concerned, it is found in a woman, in a dog, and in a house. So these are the three places where bad luck originates, where bad omen originates. And this was being discussed in the times of the Prophet by various people. And Aisha radhiyallahu anha came to know that people are saying that the Prophet did say this. He had passed away by that time. But Aisha radhiyallahu anha, when she came to know that people are saying that the Prophet said that bad luck or bad omen exists in women and in houses and in animals, singling out horses and dogs, and horses in particular, I'm sorry, she was very annoyed. And she said that who is making these statements, because the Prophet never said. And then she corrected people who were actually making these statements. You know what she said? She said the Prophet never said these words. And the misconception which has arisen is because what the Prophet actually said was that bad luck is found in women, in houses, and in animals, as believed by the Arabs. So the Prophet was actually citing a notion, a belief of the Arabs. It was not that he was giving his own belief or giving his own view. And it happens in hadith narratives at times that things get shortened, that at times sentences get dropped. And when they get dropped, we get a totally garbled meaning, a totally changed meaning. And one of these examples, as I just said, is that when Aisha radhiyallahu anha saw that people were ascribing this statement to the Prophet, she became extremely annoyed. And she said, he never said this. What he said is that this is what the Arabs believed. So this part, this is what the Arabs believed, was somehow struck off from some of these narratives, and people started to attribute the statement to the Prophet himself. And this was then corrected by the Prophet, by Aisha radhiyallahu anha. So my viewers, I will end my session here just to summarize that we need to understand that at times the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is speaking as an administrator. At times he's speaking as a human being. At times he's speaking as a husband. But there are other times in which he specifies that he is speaking in his capacity of religion. He's speaking as a person who is giving guidance on behalf of the Almighty. On all such occasions, of course, we are bound to follow him. But on other occasions, we need to understand the background. We need to understand the context. And we need to understand the exact placement of what he is saying. At times, what he is saying is based on certain reasoning. And when that reasoning is no more there, the direction or the directive does not apply. At times, he is saying something in the capacity of a person who is trying to make things safe and secure for his people, because as the ruler of his society, the strife-ridden society of Arabia, he was bound to be a ruler who would grant this life of peace and comfort to his people. So if this distinction is not made, we end up at times making laws and legislations which the Prophet never intended to be made as laws and legislations. And finally, as I said, that at times we get ahadiths which are reported in a manner in which the context or some particular line is accidentally or unintentionally dropped from that particular text, and an absolutely different thing is conveyed. So the best thing in this regard is that we have to collate all our hadiths, and we'll get to know that at times what is missing in one hadith is supplied in the other hadith, and in this way we can sort of construct a whole story out of it by gathering all the pieces. So this in a nutshell was what I wanted to discuss today, vis-a-vis some of the important misconceptions related to Islam. I now end my talk here and would like to have any questions that you would want to pose vis-a-vis what we have just discussed today.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. I have a question, but before that, I just needed to make a few announcements quickly. Dr. Saab's this class is also broadcasted live on his Facebook page. If you cannot get to the GoToWebinar on a computer, you can always attend it from his Facebook page. The only difference would be that we will not be able to take your questions as we can here. Also, if you're unable to attend this class from your PC or laptop, you can also call in, and that information is in the reminders that you get. There's a number and there's a code, meeting code, that you can use to do that. Also, please forgive us for any audio issues that you may have had today. Before the next class, inshallah, we'll retest the setup and make sure that this is resolved. Dr. Saab, I have a question from Farana Saiba. She says, sorry, it's a little off topic, but it's this particular question has been bothering her, so if you could answer it. She says, if two people made the same mistake or sin, then why is it that one person gets a worse punishment, I think she means in this world, and the other person, another person who may have done something really wrong that we know of and enjoys all the bounties and all the benefits in life from Allah, and no punishment apparently comes to that person?
Well, I just need to have a small clarification. What she's asking, what I have understood from her question, is that at times people who do a sin or they commit a sin, they go scot-free in this world, while some of the other persons who are equally involved, they might suffer something. Is that what she's asking?
I think so, but Farana Saiba, if you want to clarify, your mic is open.
Yes, it is safe.
Okay, so you see, at times the Almighty has given us the respite to make hay, to do more evil if we are given this time, and therefore become absolutely worthy of the punishment, or become clearly worthy of the punishment by telling the world that they don't deserve any leniency, by actually giving this impression to the world that the Almighty wants to make the whole matter crystal clear. If He's going to punish a person, then at times He gives that person more respite, so that if he has the time, he can mend his ways. If he has the time to correct himself, he should be given that time. But at times it is done so that he is made to do even more evil, so that when his matter is decided in the hereafter, there will be absolutely no doubt about him, and the whole society would be actually vouching for the fact that he needs this punishment. So you see, we have to understand that at times God does not always punish people who do evil here for these various reasons. But what we need to understand is that they shall be punished in the hereafter, and a person who was not punished here or who was actually not compensated here, if I may say, in this world for doing good, he will be more than compensated in the hereafter. So if a person is doing good and still suffering, and if a person is doing bad and still relishing this life, it does not mean that it's going to stay like this. The Almighty at times provides this time or gives respite to the evil people, so that either they can mend their ways or they can fully do the evil that they want to, so that in the end, when they are punished, they are left with no excuse. On the other hand, at times the Almighty deprives people who are good with good reward in this world, or maybe a good life in this world, so that the Almighty wants to test whether they are patient or not. So the reward of patience is paradise, as the Quran has said at one place, Jazahum bima sabaru jannatan wa harira. It is basically the reward of the patience that we are given paradise. So for these people who, in spite of doing good are not rewarded good in this world. For them, it's an exercise in patience, and if they exercise this patience, the Almighty is bound to compensate them much, much more in the hereafter.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. Tawseef Chaudhry Saab, please go ahead with your question.
Assalamualaikum.
Right,
This is a question from last time, actually, the age of Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha that
Yes.
you mentioned.
Yes, yes.
The misunderstanding. One more reason I heard was, I think, from Professor Gandhi that it was their colloquial way that they say 6 and 9 and leave the 10 out. So it was 16 and 19, you know. But what my question is, didn't any of the Arab scholar mention and clarify that? It's understandable from our, subcontinent scholar that they're not familiar with the way the Arabs speak. But what about any Arab scholar pointed that out over the last 13, 1400 years? Or, the scholars like Ghazali and others, Ibn Taymiyyah, and they also agreed with that?
Not to my knowledge. None of the scholars have. And let me also tell you the reason. And the reason is that once a hadith comes in a celebrated anthology as Bukhari, you see, the general consensus of our ulama is that once hadith enters Bukhari, and about Bukhari, the general verdict is it is the most correct book after the Quran. So they stop questioning a hadith which enter Bukhari, and they say that if Imam Bukhari has made his evaluation and has actually recorded a hadith in his Sahih, to them it becomes simply as unquestionable as anything can be, as in fact the word of God. So to them, questioning a hadith once it's part of a very famous anthology like Imam Bukhari's Jami' Sahih, they would not question it. And the thing that they would adopt, on the other hand, would be they would try to make sense out of it. And they would say, okay, this is how Arabs used to do, or this is how it happened. So instead of perhaps answering the critique on what the counter people would say, they would just try to justify what has entered or what is recorded in Bukhari. So this is basically a mindset in which we tend to give reverence to what is found in Imam Bukhari. And this is not just one example. I can give you many examples in which there are ahadith which are in Bukhari. But because of the fact that people think that Imam Bukhari cannot falter, or he has actually recorded something which is absolutely true or correct, they don't question it. And that is what has happened in the last 12 centuries.
One more question on the hadith you mentioned. I think that is one of the most significant errors I think this ummah has gone into, right? With the misinterpretation and misunderstanding of hadith. Can you tell us a little bit about, I know Al-Mawrid is going through the whole hadith project, and where someone can go and look at the hadith, okay, what is the true understanding of that hadith, or what's the level of it, is sahih, mutawatir, dhaif, even ma'du, fabricated. Is there a categorization that Al-Mawrid is doing, that if I know a hadith and a reference, I can just go there and it's rightful interpretation? I haven't seen anywhere, if you say, as you said, they are just taken as actually as Quran. You cannot question that, right?
Yes, the work on hadith started almost a year and a half ago, and the expanse or the corpus of hadith is huge. We've got almost 80,000 narratives that we need to categorize and, of course, evaluate. So we have done about 15 or 20,000 of them, and those narratives have been classified. They have been published in our Urdu journal Ishraq, and we do plan to publish them as a separate publication after some more work is done. But of course, since we need no more people to do this, and since the corpus of the work is, as I said, it extends to almost 80,000 to 100,000 narratives, and given the fact that we have just covered about 20,000 and the remaining 60 or 80,000 are more detailed ones, so I think another roughly 8 to 10 years at least are needed to complete the work. And as far as the work itself is concerned, what we are doing here is that we have divided our hadith into two categories. One category is that we need to place all the correct narratives, all the sound narratives, in a manner in which they are placed, they're understood in the light of the Quran, and they are placed in relation to various Quranic verses. And that is how we categorize and arrange our hadith, by collecting and collating all our hadiths of one topic and then trying to interpret them in the light of the Quran. So that is just one part of the work. The second part of the work is to critically evaluate certain narratives which seem to go against the Quran, the Sunnah, and establish history. So that is the second part, in which there are some narratives which have, although they are found in sound books like Bukhari and Muslim and even Muwatta, but they seem to go against the Quran. So that's the second part, in which these narratives are critically evaluated, and then they are sifted out and collated, and the truth from them is deciphered. So these are basically two categories. One are the sound narratives, which have to be categorized and interpreted in the light of the Quran, and the other ones are the unsound narratives, but they are found in sound collections or sound anthologies. They have made their way into these sound anthologies, but they need this critical reevaluation. So that is going on parallel, side by side. So these are the two-pronged. This is a two-pronged approach that we have adopted in trying to assess and evaluate our hadith.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions, please? Dr. Saab, we have 4 minutes remaining. There is no more questions.
Okay.
So, okay, we can end this session. Inshallah, we'll meet next Saturday.
Inshallah.
11 Central.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Khuda Hafiz. Goodbye. Thank you.